Chapter 18. Worried Plotters. When there was no answer to Nancy's knock, she tried again. Still no one came to open the door of Mrs. Wilson's home. Disappointed, Nancy was about to turn away when Bess rushed up to her. She had been standing some distance back from the house and had been gazing at the windows. Now she exclaimed in an excited whisper, "Somebody is home! I saw a middle-aged woman looking out of one of the second-floor windows." "Middle-aged?" George repeated. "That couldn't be old Mrs. Wilson." "That's right," Nancy agreed. "I wonder why the woman doesn't come and answer my knock." "Maybe she's deaf," George suggested, and ran back from the doorway so she could be in plain sight if anyone looked out the window again. Nancy, meanwhile, hammered the door knocker vigorously. No one came to answer it. "Evidently they don't want to see us," said Bess. The three girls discussed the question of whether it was just they who were not welcome, or whether no callers were allowed into the house. They did not come to any conclusion. "Why don't we pretend to leave?" said Nancy. "We'll go down the driveway a short distance and double back, using the trees as a screen." She and the cousins followed this plan and remained in hiding for nearly 10 minutes. They had a good view of the house, but no one appeared at any of the windows or came to open the door. "We may as well go," said Bess. "Not yet," Nancy begged. "I see a way to get up to the house without being spotted. Normally I dislike eavesdropping, but in this case I think it is justified." The young sleuth managed to make her way behind trees and among bushes to an open, screened window not far from the front door. She had barely settled into a comfortable listening position when a car came up the driveway. At once, Bess was terrified. "Now we'll be caught," she told George. "Shh!" her cousin warned and pulled Bess down to a stooping position. "Nancy's well out of sight. I'm sure nobody will see her." As the car went past the place where the cousins were hiding, they could see the lone driver plainly. He was the man who had followed Nancy in River Heights and George in Deep River. "He may have trailed us here," Bess worried. "If so, he'll hunt until he finds Nancy." George set her jaw. "If he does, you and I will run forward and help her." The man parked his car and went up to the front door. To the girl's surprise, he took a key from his pocket and let himself into the house. Nancy, who had seen all this clearly and fortunately had not been noticed, wondered if the stranger lived here. Again the thought went through her mind, "I've seen that man someplace." As she tried hard to think where it had been, she heard voices in the room just above where she was crouched.
"Rudy Raspin!"
exclaimed another man's voice.
"Why did you come here in the daytime? You know we agreed that all our meetings would be at night." "Listen, old man,"
said Raspin.
"Don't give me orders. Things aren't going well. We'd better scram."
A woman's voice said, "What happened?" Before Raspin could answer, O-Man broke in. But he had barely started to speak when the woman quickly ordered, "Be quiet, Ben. Listen to Rudy."
"You're a nagging wife, Clara,"
O-Man complained. Nancy's heart was thumping with excitement. O-Man! The name on the postcard which had been found in Grandmother Horton's home. Also, Nancy was sure from the sound of Ben O-Man's voice that he was Mr. Seaman. So the man was using an alias. Raspin went on,
"Jake Suggs is in jail, and he has talked."
Even outdoors, Nancy could hear the gasps of alarm from the O-Mans. They asked what had happened.
"That pesky Drew girl and her friends searched the castle and found Suggs. I always said he was too dumb to be trusted. Well, they took him to the police. Then a few hours later, Suggs told the cops about Mr. Wheeler, and they went out to the castle and rescued him. And now Wheeler will start talking,
O-Man exclaimed in a thoroughly alarmed tone of voice.
We are in a tight spot.
His wife, who sounded doubtful about the story, asked,
Where did you get all this information, Rudy? You wouldn't have dared to go to the jail to see Jake. I wouldn't, eh?
Raspin asked in a sneering tone.
I'll tell you how I managed it. I just happened to go to that tea room you like so much, and the old busybody there told me the story about Suggs being captured and Wheeler being found. Then I went to the jail.
Raspin laughed.
Pretty clever of me, too, the way I did it. I put on a disguise and wrote a letter on stolen official state stationery I keep on hand along with other handy forms I pick up. The letter, addressed to Chief Burke, said I was a member of a state committee on jail inspection. I signed an assumed name. So did you talk to Suggs? Said Omen. Right. And I found out something else from him. Nancy Drew has my Moonstone. How'd she get it?
Ben O-Man cried out, and his wife asked,
When did you learn that, Rudy? Suggs told me. That fool held the Drew girl prisoner a short time until he was discovered. Those girlfriends of hers stood right outside the secret door on the castle cellar stairway. Suggs heard one of them say, That Moonstone somebody sent her certainly didn't help Nancy.
O-Man whistled as Raspin, now in a loud and angry voice, said,
I don't know who sent it to her, but I have an idea. If I'm right, Well, never mind. That's a personal matter. But I'm going to get the Moonstone back. I've had bad luck ever since it disappeared.
Nancy was amazed to hear that the Moonstone she had received belonged to Rudy Raspin. Who had sent it to her, and why had it been taken from him? After a few moments' silence, Raspin spoke again.
I tell you, it's getting too hot around here. The sooner we get out, the better. Just a minute, said O-Man. I'm not going to give up this job. You and Clara will be caught,
Raspin argued.
Listen,
said Ben O-Man in a wheedling tone.
We have the old lady just where we want her. She's too weak to resist.
The man laughed sardonically.
That's right,
spoke up Clara O-Man.
She's signing checks now without looking at them.
Rudy Raspin, apparently as greedy as his pals, laughed.
I guess we can't leave the loot behind, he said. Well, force all you can out of the old lady's checkbook today. Tomorrow we get out of here.
Nothing more was said, and in a few moments Raspin left the house. As soon as he had driven off, Nancy cautiously returned to Bess and George and told the story. They stared in speechless amazement. We must get the police right away, Nancy said. Old Mrs. Wilson is in real danger. The girls ran to Nancy's hidden car and hurried to town. As they neared the road leading up to the motel, she said, I think it would be a good idea, before we go to the police, to see if there's any word from Dad. When she reached the motel, the three girls dashed inside, all hoping for letters. There were none, and no message from Mr. Drew, but Mrs. Thompson, who was behind the desk, said, Nancy, I found an envelope here this morning. The address looked so strange, I thought I'd better keep the letter and hand it to you myself. She gave it to Nancy, then went off. Nancy's name was spelled out in letters cut from newspaper words. Tied to the envelope was a small, dark green box. Remembering the package which contained the Moonstone, Nancy quickly tore open the envelope and pulled out a note. It also was made from newspaper words. The message read, Please return Moonstone. Now I am in danger as well as you. Leave it in this box tonight under the rhododendron bush at the foot of the motel driveway. It was signed The Well-Wisher. Nancy showed the note to her friends, who gasped in astonishment. As the three girls walked away, Nancy said, "We'll leave the box tonight, but not the moonstone, and we'll be on watch to see who comes." End of chapter 18.